Welcome back to the Foundational Skills mini course. This is our second module, and today we'll be focusing on phonological awareness. Once again, I'm Carrie Swanson.
Once again, I am David Lieben, although even older than when I was last time you saw me.
Time has passed. Just a reminder again about Student Achievement Partners and the resources that we offer on Achieve the Core. We're a nonprofit and we're set up for you, so we hope you take advantage of the resources there. This module's goals are to, first of all, be able to define and explain phonological and phonemic awareness, really making sure the difference between those two is clear, but also how they're connected. To identify and explain the purpose of tasks and games that are meant to build phonemic awareness in students, and to identify the relationship between phonemic awareness and reading proficiency. So again, just a reminder that phonological awareness is one of the buckets from the Common Core standards, and it's our focus for today, one of those four components of foundational skills. And a reminder of the description that we showed you all on the last module, and that this is a kindergarten and first grade specific area of focus. Should be complete by second grade, but should absolutely take precedent for intervention if any students do show any deficits in that area.
I would just add that phonological awareness has been shown to be the best predictor by far of early reading, a better predictor than income or anything, or even vocabulary or anything else. But early reading that we're talking about now, phonological awareness is the best predictor.
So important, really important.
Yep.
To kind of illustrate what phonological awareness is, we're going to ask you to engage in an oral task. So you can either pause and do this with groups if you're working with your colleagues, or just go ahead and talk to your computer if you're not, but please make sure you're engaging with us. Your task is just to say the phrase, hello, my name is, and your name. So I would say, hello, my name is Carrie. However, you're going to do that with a little bit of a trick. You're going to swap out the first phoneme or the first sound in each word with the sound that is represented by the letter on the screen. So for example, the first one, you can see we're talking about the letter B, so the sound, and I would say bellow by Babe Biz Berry. The letter is going to change as we go, so make sure, even if you're by yourself, you're doing this out loud, and go ahead and join us. David, you want to try the B for everyone?
Bellow by Babe Biz David.
All right, so you guys go ahead and do that at home. Pause if you need to make sure you've tried all of the letters on the screen. We're going to move on. That task was actually phoneme substitution. We'll talk a little bit more about that in depth, but hopefully that was potentially fun and maybe even a little bit challenging for all of you.
And think about whether it came naturally. And if it didn't come naturally, it's just one phoneme. There are 44 in the language. And you know your name, and the syntax wasn't that complex. Hello, my name is, instead of bellow by Babe is, you get the point. So what made it unnatural and what made it difficult?
Great, and keep that thinking as we go through this, because we're really on to what can be challenging for kids as well. So what is phonological awareness? Phonological awareness is a broad skill. It's an umbrella term. It refers to awareness of sound. So that can include identifying and manipulating units of oral language, so parts of syllables, onset and rhyme, and then phonemes. We will go into phonemes as one part of this skill. Everything related to phonological awareness is done through hearing and speaking. So breaking up helicopter into its syllables, or finding rhyming words that rhyme with boy are two examples of many tasks related to phonological awareness.
Now raise your hand if you think the last word in the next to last line is a typo or a spelling error. I see a few hands out there. Kerry will explain that as we move on, but it's not a typo, I assure you, nor a spelling error.
Onset and rhyme, R-I-M-E is what he's referring to there. So this is a skill that is really better thought of as a continuum. You can think of the parts of phonological awareness as going from big to small, or from simple to more complex. So you start teaching phonological awareness before letter recognition is secure with large units, rhymes and alliteration, hearing the sounds and words. And then building into counting how many words might be in a sentence, identifying that there are separate words in sentences. And from there, you move into syllables, the syllables in spoken words. So you can be working with helicopter, right? Because students don't need to read it, they can hear it. And then from there, you're moving into word parts, onset and rhyme, as David was hinting at, being able to hear the initial sound in the word and then the rest of the word. So in the word part, the p is the onset and art is the rhyme.
Everything that follows the initial consonant is the rhyme, R-A-M, R-I-M-E, or the initial consonants. So like in plain, PL are the initial consonants. That's a blend of put and ul. PL are the initial consonants. A-N-E are the rhyme. So PL is the onset. It's where the word onsets, the start of the word. And A-N-E is the rhyme. And if you think about it, plain and main rhyme because their R-I-M-Es are the same.
So students are engaging in doing all of these things so that they are breaking words apart, segmenting them, they're blending them back together. They're doing this orally. It connects to games and tasks that we talked about in the last module. And from there, they're ready to draw their awareness to the individual sounds and words, or phonemes. And we'll talk more about that as we go. But research shows that with proficient readers, the more they know about words, phonology, orthography, morphology, grammar, etymology, the better prepared they are to read, and the better that they do read.
Phonological awareness, as even those of us who have not studied Noam Chomsky over the years, know this must have something to do with sounds because of phonological. In the book that we're going to talk about later, by Marilyn Adams, they actually start this with literally sounds. They ask children, they'll make a sound like crumbling paper, sharpening a pencil, opening a window, and they'll ask the children to describe the sound, or what is that the sound of. They have their eyes closed and they're asked to label that sound. So the teacher crumples the paper, the children have their eyes closed, and they have to say what the sound is. And they actually move then to sequencing sounds, which is really interesting because they're going to be doing a lot of sequencing in phonics when they work on sounds and letters. So they'll crumple a paper, play a key on a piano, and open a window and ask the children what were the sounds they heard in order. And they'll even introduce the word sequence, which is interesting in a lot of ways because the child who's having trouble remembering those three things is going to need more attention. Sometimes you don't need extensive diagnostic tools. A child who can't hold in their mind three sounds that they just heard is either not hearing the sounds correctly, or they're having trouble holding in their short-term memory, what psychologists sometimes call working memory. Three things. Working memory has been connected to reading. So right away with something like that, you know that's a child that's going to need more time, more attention in order to succeed. And that's all in this book and all in games. And Kerry will tell more about the book later.
You're cueing the parents of 3- and 4-year-olds in the audience to go and give 3-part
I've recommended it to every 3 and 4, every parent of 3- and 4-year-olds, including the parents of my grandchild.
I reference my daughter Zoe a lot with my work, but I have a 3-year-old Felix, so I have something new to try with him at home. We'll get back to you on that. So phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is that smallest but most complex part of phonological awareness. It is one component. It's the component you're going to spend the most time on with your students. And it refers to the ability to focus on individual sounds or phonemes in spoken words. So phonemes are the smallest unit of sound within words.
And that's exactly what they are, and that's all they are. They are very important for the reasons we've been discussing, because we're moving now from phonology, which has to do with hearing sounds, such as crumpled paper, with hearing the sounds in word, with hearing how many words are in a sentence, with hearing syllables, with hearing alliteration, down to the smallest level. But that's the level that we'll be working, that students and teachers will be working with the most in phonological awareness.
They spend their time on what's most complex, so that works, right? We have some examples here for you. I think I went right through what David was going to present. You want me to talk through these ones, David?
Repetition is good.
So some of our examples here are actually tasks that sort of build along this continuum, right? So with the first simplest task around oral rhyme and alliteration, we have just students recognizing in the sentence, "My cat wears a hat," that there are two rhyming words, cat and hat, sound the same at the end, they rhyme. Moving into the words in spoken sentences here, students counting, "I have a cat." Cat is one of the four words in that sentence. Syllables in spoken words, right? Cat is a one syllable word. Kids can clap it. They'll clap one time. Onset and rhyme again. The beginning, the onset of the word cat is k, and the rhyme is at, right? That's the rest of the word. And then once again, phonemic awareness. So what is the first sound that you hear in the word cat? You hear k, and that's phonemic awareness. That's the connection that we'll spend more time on today and move into when we get to phonics.
I want to just add quickly that rhyming is early on. Children who are struggling to rhyme are going to have trouble. They will learn how to rhyme. It will take them more time, but every single piece that follows afterwards is going to take them more time.
Might challenge you to think about why that's true as we go through this module and see if you can answer what that means that they're struggling with that's connected to later reading.
Right. This slide makes me want to go to the dentist.
So the dentist slide. So a key starting point for phonemic awareness is phoneme articulation, which means actually teaching students the mouth position to correctly pronounce phonemes. In your handouts today, you have a consonant phoneme and a vowel phoneme chart. These handouts include articulation features. They're a Cliff Notes version of what you actually do with your mouth. The resources come from a tool that's a virtual tool. It's called the Reading Teacher's Top 10 Tools. It's a really in-depth reading course by Dr. Deb Glazer, and that course goes into much greater depth than what we're offering. So we highly recommend that course as a follow-up if you and your teaching teams or those that you work with need more professional development. It includes the suggestion of using mirrors for practice, both practice by a teacher and then practice by students during instruction to ensure that their mouth positioning is accurate and helps support what we know about the sounds.
This is especially helpful with kids who are struggling. To take this, and it's solidly research-based by Linnea Erie, one of the people I think we mentioned in the first module, that students who struggle, if you show them how their mouth needs to move for different sounds, that supports their learning in phonemic awareness, phonemic articulation, and phonics and reading.
So just a couple of examples here of what this really looks like. So phonemic awareness moves from making the individual sounds to hearing and identifying phonemes in words. Students are going to hear the phonemes, and then they're going to isolate those phonemes and isolate the initial, medial, or final sounds. And if you've worked a lot with students in this age, you know those medial sounds are the hardest for them to hear. So we have an example here with the sounds of bat, and students being able to identify the b, the a, and the t. And then they eventually need to be able to segment those words into their individual phonemes and then blend them back together. And as they move through that, we want them to also manipulate phonemes. That's what you guys did in the first task, the below by Bain Biz, where you're adding or deleting or moving designated phonemes. Students can do this to make nonsense words. They can do this to make new words. It can be a game, so it's all oral, so spelling patterns don't matter at this point. They're not engaging with the print here. They're just engaging with the sounds.
And sometimes people have trouble with that. They say, I want to teach them how to read, that there's no letters. We're not talking about letters. We're talking about sounds. And sounds have a great deal to do. A word is made up of letters, but the letters don't make the sounds. The letter L makes no sounds. It's mute. It stands for a sound. It stands for the old sound. The letter A stands or is a symbol. One of the things when we turned our school around and we started teaching this that we found very helpful, we introduced this in kindergarten and say, what is a letter? And we would say a letter is a picture of a sound. And sounds have a great deal to do with reading, as you're coming to see in this course. So focusing on sounds at first is research-based, makes a lot of sense, and it also lends itself, as we've been discussing, to so many different games and fun activities.
Right. We will go to some more related games when we talk about our early reading that are really related to this manipulation of phonemes that we're talking about here. So quick pop quiz for you all. David is watching you, right, in wherever your setting is. If you know, jot down to yourself how many phonemes there are in the English language, how many consonant sounds, and how many vowel sounds. And we'll reveal that to you.
Because I gave one of them away earlier.
Yeah, so there are 44 phonemes in the English language, if you were listening closely. 25 of these are consonant sounds and 19 are vowel sounds. They're on your chart. Most folks agree. You'll find there is a tiny bit of variation once you get into nuanced interpretations in linguistic textbooks based on categorization. But most folks are in agreement here that these are the sounds of the English language. And if you are not if this is new information for you, if you've not done a lot of work with this, you might want to pause the module and just use your handouts and practice making the sounds and pay attention to whether you have any trouble isolating phonemes. This is also another plug for a structured scope and sequence because that scope and sequence helps make sure that you're introducing students to sounds in a systematic way. So if this isn't something you're already an instructional expert on, your materials can really help you a lot here. We're going to practice just identifying phonemes in words, and then we have a challenge task for you all. So we're asking you to identify the phonemes, and then we'll walk you through it. So pause if you need more time. How many phonemes are in the word cat? This is something that David mentions he struggles with because of his accent. So we'll see how he does here.
Brooklyn accent does get in the way sometimes with phonemic awareness and phonics.
So there are 3 phonemes. This is a pretty basic one. It's a CBC word, act. Moving into another word, just to make sure that we're clear on letters versus phonemes. How many phonemes are in the word show? And I will show you that there are 2 phonemes there. Sh is the first one, and O is the next phoneme. Again, you can see it written in different ways, but that's the long O sound. So 4 letters, but 2 phonemes. You can hear those separate sounds, sh and O. And then a challenge one for you, just a longer word, an octopus.
Give them a little time. This one is tough.
Well, they can pause. Yep, pause if you need more time. And we will show you the answer. So if you don't have it yet, you're going to pause. And there are 7 phonemes. And you may notice in this case, there is the schwa sound. The schwa sound can be made by, it's the sound that can be made by any vowel. In this case, the O is going octa, so 7 phonemes in this word. It can be challenging. It can be, some of you might have found it quite easy, but the key here is not how many phonemes are in words, but whether you can hear them and whether you can help students to build the skill to hear them as discrete sounds. Your bigger pause point here, your longer task that you'll definitely have to pause, is to apply these ideas in context. So because of the PowerPoint, we are showing you this in print. The speech bubble represents that this is an oral task. So look at the words on this slide, this phrase, how are you today? Are you having fun? And pause and talk to your colleagues or on your own to identify how many sentences, how many words, how many syllables, and how many phonemes. And when you press play again, we will go ahead and go to our answer key for you. So make sure you're pausing and doing this first.
This is freaking hard.
Take some time. All right, so you have only pressed play if you've gotten your answer. I will tell you, we have done this in live PD before, and we never hear anyone dispute the 2 sentences, 8 words, or 10 syllables. But we've had a lot of conversations about how many phonemes. We have identified that there are 20. Just to make sure, if you really need to check your work, we have a further answer key here. That shows you the phonemes that we found in each of these words. So you can pause and compare to your own work if you didn't get to 20. And if you disagree with us, feel free to email us why. As we've gone back and forth with this one.
Yeah, we had a little trouble with this. Related to the reading wars, we had the phoneme wars. There was a lot of disagreement as to how many phonemes are in these 2 sentences, but it was, the point is, it was very instructive.
Right, and this can help illustrate, this is not a task you would have children do, but it can help illustrate to staff how challenging this work really is, and how complex this work really is. You all do this all the time. You hear the sounds and words, and you read very fluently, and so being able to access the challenges at a kindergarten and 1st grade level can be hard for adults sometimes. And this can kind of illustrate how much work there really is involved in teaching early reading.
You know, I may have touched on this in the opening session, and I think we get to it later. But it's important to understand that this has nothing to do with intelligence. Those students who pick this up quicker are not necessarily the smartest students in the class. Those students who struggle are not necessarily the weakest students in the class. They're the weakest in this, perhaps, but this is an entirely different part of the brain, other than the parts of the brain that have to do with analysis and understanding. It's really a straightforward representation of dealing with the part of the brain that processes sounds, the phonological processor, and that's it. And of course, hearing ability, but most students have normal hearing. The vast majority of us have normal hearing ability. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Like any skill, I think there's probably people who are sitting and watching this who are saying, what are you talking about? This is all so easy for me as an adult. And then there are probably people who are saying, yes, I'm having a hard time as a grown-up with these tasks. So just like any skill, hopefully if you're in a group right now, you have a range. But it is more challenging for some people than others. As we're thinking about why phonemic awareness, we have this quote from the book that we've talked a great deal about, Beginning to Read, that you can read on the screen. And this speaks to the point that we made in the last module about how this instruction is beneficial for all, but critical for some.
This is Marilyn's book, Marilyn Adams. That was the book that I told you that was actually commissioned by Congress that synthesized the results of over 1,000 studies to determine the best way to teach the largest number of children how to succeed in beginning reading.
So we're going to do some more tasks now that help us illustrate some of the challenges found in listening for phonemes. So the first task for you as an adult is you're going to listen to the words that I say. And when you hear me say the word dog, you're going to give a thumbs up. So I'm going to say a group of words. When you hear dog, thumbs up. Teeth. Dog. Student. Dog. Rot. Sound. Okay. So I'm going to move to the next task. Similar task, slight variation. Now you're listening for phonemes. So I'm going to now say a group of words, and you're listening for the t sound. And if you hear that sound, t, you're going to give a thumbs up. Fork, cat, treat, puppy, study. Okay. Think for a minute or talk to your colleagues about which of those tasks was more difficult. Was it more difficult to listen for words, or was it more difficult to listen for the phoneme t, and why? And we're going to talk about that a little bit with you now. So this comes from research that's done on adults, and we found, and research shows, that listening for discrete phonemes is a lot more challenging, even for adults, than listening for words. And that's because our brains are actually not set up to be consciously aware of individual phonemes. David, do you want to say a little bit more about this?
Yes. Language is, the ability to learn language is built into the genomes. It's intrinsic, it's genetic. We were designed to learn how to recognize words and how to speak words roughly 300,000 years ago. I can say that accurately now because my current reading is a history of the gene. And it was about 300,000 years ago that Homo sapiens first emerged from whatever came before. So speaking is natural. Recognizing phonemes is not. It's an entirely unnatural action. But it's necessary to succeed easily, for most students to succeed easily, with beginning reading. So listening for words was not a problem, but listening for phonemes is much more difficult. And that's why, and even with saying that, some kids are going to pick it up very easily, some not so much. But be aware that it's not natural, and be aware, as I said earlier, that it's not connected to intelligence.
So to further illustrate that, I'm going to really think about now what that might feel like for a kindergarten student. So one who has not learned anything about necessarily phonemic awareness. So our task for you is to ask you to listen to a word. It's Arabic word, the word for purple, and see if you can identify the Arabic phonemes. And presuming that many of you do not otherwise speak Arabic, that task is set up for you to just listen to this word. Can you identify the phonemes? So it played twice. You can pause and rewind and play again if you need to hear one more time. But most likely you had a hard time with that. And that's because most of you probably don't actually know what the Arabic phonemes are, and there's nothing acoustically discrete about them. Be able to identify them in a word that you don't know and be able to identify those individual sounds is really challenging even for adults. So for kindergartners, students need a lot of oral practice. They need to be able to listen, and they need to be able to say the sounds of words and to learn to think that way.
I think even amongst hopefully 500 or 600 or 700 of you that are out there, some of you did a lot better than others. Carrie did much better than I when we first did this. Everybody did better than I. My ability to discriminate sounds is terrible. I also have no ear for music. And when I learned French for 2 years in college, or 2 years, whatever it was, 3 years, one of the most frustrating moments of my life was sitting down next to a 7-year-old in Switzerland who only spoke French, where I was working for the summer, and I couldn't understand the word he said. So there is a range of abilities in this, and some students are going to need much more work than others.
You're making me think of if any of you use the app Duolingo to learn another language, and you actually have times where you're pronouncing words back, and sometimes the phone recognizes them and sometimes they don't. Even though you might think that's what I said, you're likely pronouncing the phonemes inaccurately, and that's leading to a blended word that doesn't actually match the language that you're learning. So that's for adults to experience this, because we know that kids experience this in varied ways, sometimes with a lot of success and sometimes with a lot of challenge. And so in terms of building phonological awareness, we have some suggestions in terms of how to do that.
For the most part, it's got to be prioritized in early K. It really should start the first day of school. As we've said a number of times, it's all games and all fun activities. Has to be a huge part in kindergarten. One of the things I found early on when I started turning so much of my attention to foundational skills is that the schools that were failing with this, that were willing to grapple with this kind of approach, did not spend enough time on phonological awareness, and particularly phonemic awareness. And that caused all kinds of trouble.
And we know from our survey data that a lot of you all, many of you said that you spend 10 or 15 minutes on foundational skills as a whole. Not all, some of you have comprehensive programs, but this is the point where you might be thinking about what this means for your time use in your schools or settings.
So in the middle to late kindergarten, the phonemic awareness is going to be connected to phonics. Virtually any of your programs will do that. A lot of the good programs, the program that we use to turn our school around, which is called Preventing Academic Failure, began every warm-up over the course of the 3 years with some phonological or phonemic awareness. Because it gets the kids geared. It's almost like stretching your muscles before you play a sport. So it moves into more support in middle to late kindergarten and first grade, as opposed to being essential and the focus of a lot in early kindergarten and for much of kindergarten. Once you reach second grade, it should be pretty solid, but it's still helpful to have warm-ups with second grade, which some programs do.
Yeah.
And you may find that some kids are going to need, even in second grade, and even after they've been doing this for 2 years, to have some more support with phonemic awareness.
So some guidelines here in terms of what that instructional time means.
So you have whole group instruction, and you have student practice, and you have small group work. This is not exactly a revolutionary concept here, that you have whole group and student practice and small group work. What's important, though, is that whatever time is allotted to phonics and phonemic awareness in your program, whether it's, and it really does need to be 45 to 60 minutes, but whatever that is, those students who are not grabbing on to phonemic awareness need extra time, and they need it in small groups. It could work individually. Interestingly, the research here is interesting in that small groups work seems to do as well as individual work, which is somewhat counterintuitive. Certainly you can do individual. If you only have one child, you might as well do it individually. But you're not losing anything by doing it in small group work. What is absolutely essential, and what will cause problems rather, is if you sense children are having trouble, regardless of how much time is devoted in the program you're using, if you don't give extra time to those students in small group work with phonemic awareness, they're going to fall farther and farther behind.
We know that time is one of the biggest barriers to implementation for people, which is why we want to spend time on it. And our foundational skills guidance documents include grade level breakdowns for kindergarten, first and second grade, and suggested use of time. And again, if you have a really strong program, those time guidelines will already be met, and those suggestions will be within those materials. But as you're thinking about this and considering the needs of your school or the settings that you support, really think about this connection to research around student success. This is where priorities lie, because this is the time when students can build these skills that otherwise they'll be kind of lagging behind and creating a deficit. And if you need some support in sort of building phonological awareness and using that time, we do have some suggestions in terms of how to meet those needs, especially thinking about in kindergarten. So we already talked, David, I think, about using your core program. And you were just talking about small groups. So I was thinking of sort of rooting this, this suggestion here around early kindergarten repeating activities in small groups during transitions or as a warm-up, being able to repeat those activities. And then David's talked already about a book that we recommend to add, supplement any core curriculum.
Phonemic awareness in young children. I've given this to maybe 24 pre-Ks, because a lot of the things that we've been talking about, really all the things we've been talking about with phonological awareness and phonemic awareness can be done in pre-K. And what a great start that is. So for those of you who work with pre-K or in systems that have pre-K, I've given about 24 pre-K programs this book, and every single one of them marveled at how much of a difference it made when their kids went on to kindergarten. If you don't have the pre-K, or if you haven't done this in pre-K, this is an excellent book to use with and in addition to any program that you have.
And it's full of activities that are fun and engaging. So absolutely builds on that enhancements piece. So continuing to think about what this looks like in instruction, one of the things that's most important are with these tasks being oral, we want to make sure that there's a mix of what the teacher is saying and doing and what the students are saying and hearing and doing. And again, often when we think of instructional time, we make the mistake of thinking that instruction is what the teacher is saying. We want to make sure that we're looking at also the part of instruction that's what the children are doing. So just some examples, starting with an example in rhyme. If the teacher is drawing students' attention to the end sound in words like cast and blast, then the students are actually responsible for finding those rhyming words and being able to share them themselves. So they've got past and rast, and really hard for us, but another just reminder that nonsense words still rhyme, and honestly, some words sound like nonsense words to kids if their vocabulary is not built yet. So let them do that. One
thing, nonsense words are great, but if you're going to use a real word such as cast or blast, tell the students what it means.
Absolutely.
Never let that opportunity grow. It's much more meaningful for the students when they know the meaning of the word.
And that helps connect reading to meaning just from the first sort of building blocks of reading.
Right.
Moving to an example with words and sentences. Here, the focus is hearing and counting words and sentences. So the teacher is saying the sentence and asking for how many words, and the students are counting and naming those words together, right? So they're chorally counting, they're responsible for the doing. The next example here we have is around syllables. So you may be building students' ability to recognize how many syllables are in a word. So clap and say each word with me. How many syllables? The teacher is saying monkey and the students are saying and clapping monkey. So again, teacher saying and doing, students are saying and doing. Another example with onset and rhyme. In this case, the teacher is providing the onset and the rhyme, and the students are blending the words back together. So the teacher is saying the first sound and the rest of the word, and the students are turning those sounds at into the word cat, blending those together.
And notice that these children are dancing. So if you can integrate this with any kind of movement where they're standing up and they raise their left hand out to look like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever for the C, K, and then their right hand out for at. There's research to show that this kind of integration of movement and sounds helps solidify the learning, and it certainly makes the day more pleasant.
Right, not an accidental clip art choice, but an intentional choice to illustrate what this should look like and sound like in the classroom. An example of phonemes, so again, that word play, the teacher saying, if I take off the in rug and add what word will I get? And the students are saying lug. And because David is always ahead of us, which helps set the pace for our course and our work, we have an example here of connecting it to meaning, right? So the students built lug, and you can say, yeah, to lug is to carry or to drag something heavy. You're lugging that across the carpet.
And then they should act out carrying a 200-pound something. across the room and say, I am lugging.
Right.
Can you lug? I'm lugging. I love lugging. I love to lug. Again, we can't say too much. The more fun you can make this, not only does it make it more fun, but it also solidifies the learning.
Right. So all of these things, teacher is supporting the task, and students are doing, saying, hearing, acting out, and working themselves as well. So we're going to have a brief chance just to see this in action, and we'll get to look at this this video here in this class a little bit more later in the course. This is just students who are listening for the long I sound in words.
I have some sound riddles. I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to tell me what word could this be with the I sound. For example, it's not cube, because that doesn't have the I sound. What might this be? I'll give you 5 seconds to think. Jacob knows, Carolyn knows, Delilah knows. Delilah?
Ice.
Repeat.
Ice.
5 seconds to think. What could this word be? It's not a lemon. It's something with the I sound. It looks kind of like a lemon, but it's green. Carolyn knows. Egypt knows. Whisper your guess. Jayla?
Lime.
Repeat.
Lime.
Ooh, I think we all know this one. What has the I sound? Say it if you know it.
Slime.
David, do you want to make a few points about that video?
I think it was somewhat clear. We didn't see the kids, but Perry assures me, because she was there, that they were all involved and that they were all focused. And it's kids like it when they succeed. And the way this program is broken down, the way a structured phonics program is broken down, the way phonemic awareness is broken down, it's kind of like maximizing the chance of success. And I think that was clear. That was clear there.
And just notice there were a few opportunities where all students were doing, they might have been whispering in their hand or saying out loud instead of just calling on one student to show. So gives more engagement from the whole class there.
Notice also that she had to tell him it wasn't a lemon, because lemons are more common than limes.
She was ready for their misunderstanding there with the picture. So I think we've made this quite clear, but we know that there are songs and games and activities and tasks that can make this fun, and we are going to get to do that through our next activity for the course. So David spoke about this book already, ensuring that these games and tasks can be added to any core curriculum. And your next pause point here is actually, we have 2 examples of games that are from the text on the screen. So what we'd like you to do is pause the webinar and take a few minutes to play either one or both of the games right now. If you're on your own, you can just do the tasks orally. You can do this on your own. If you're with a group, you want to play the game as adults with your colleagues, work together, and then resume the webinar. Great. So they're back with us.
I want to say something about the activity that you just did. When you ask students to do those kind of activities, they're not only learning about phonemic awareness and about putting substitution of sounds and blending of sounds. They're learning about the structure of language. And as you build up from each of these activities, games can really reinforce the structure of language. There was research done by a guy named Stephen Stahl, S-T-A-H-L, who showed clearly that enhancement with these kinds of games increases students' reading ability in these early areas, but it also makes them more aware of the nature of language. And the more that we can do that, the better.
So we've talked an awful lot about phonological awareness as an umbrella term and those related sub-skills. They follow a logical progression, the related skills, although they do not have to, they can be built simultaneously. You can work on more than one of these skills at a time. But there's listening, right? The student's capacity to listen. There's identifying the sentences and words. There are identifying, blending, and segmenting those syllables, isolating sounds, initial, medial, and end sounds, and then manipulating the phonemes. And finally, the last piece is really connecting those phonemes to graphemes, or the letters and groups of letters that represent the sounds in writing. And that will take us into next week's modules. As you're thinking about the games you just played, you should be able to identify the skills that the games were targeting. So hopefully you've done that in your head right now. The game number 1, which was add a sound, was really targeting isolating and manipulating the phonemes. And troll talk, which kids love, is identifying and blending syllables. And keep in mind, you can repurpose troll talk later to be the sounds of words to move towards phonemes. But just a couple of examples of making this engaging and purposeful in terms of learning. Your online discussion this week is to take this conversation and the related article, which is a link on Reading Rockets around why phonological awareness is important, and how it connects, discuss how phonemic awareness in particular is going to connect to spelling, reading, and vocabulary. So getting your head around the content that will come in next week's module. So please engage in this online discussion with your colleagues and make sure you're taking the opportunity to talk to each other.
The trickiest part of this is going to be to see how it connects to vocabulary, but the connection is there.
Great. And then your practice task. So there are 2 options for practice tasks this week. One is for early grade teachers. So you all can pick one of the games, either from the Adams book if you have it, or we have a link on the next slide to a list of games that come from that book, and play with your students and really observe them as they play. You want to note what this kind of work does for your students, and we have a template for you. And if you're not in the classroom with young students, your job's actually to write up an elevator pitch. We just went through 45 minutes of this module, and we want kind of a short 5-sentence or less a speech that you could give to someone about why phonemic awareness is important and why this is a skill we want to build in students. Keep it succinct, and hopefully you'll have occasion to use that if you're working with others and trying to message the importance of this content. A recommended reading, of course, we have the text itself, phonemic awareness in young children. You may want to read chapter 1 if you have that text, or the link right here, which goes to kind of a summary.
I'm not sure, is chapter 1 the introduction?
That's the building the importance of phonemic awareness. The rest of the book is actually student tasks. So it's not the same as her book, Beginning to Read, which is a lot of adult reading. This is actually a practical sort of student task-filled resource. And then just the last couple of slides are just reminders. You saw these last time, so I won't go into depth, but just a reminder about the resources that you can find on Achieve the Core, the opportunities involved in joining our Core Advocate Network, and the fact that we love to engage with folks who are using our resources and hear what you think. So on social media, if you want to tweet about today's course or anything that you've learned or the work that you're doing in your schools and settings. Thank you so much, and we are excited to hear from you on our office hours coming up this week, and also the next module.
And join the Core Action Network, where you can find many other people that you can do phoneme dances with.
Absolutely, phoneme dances all the time, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.